I never thought I'd be one of those people, the kind who throws a party to celebrate something as mundane as business success. But last week, I did just that. I was standing in the lobby of one of the most expensive real estate properties I'd acquired in years, surrounded by colleagues, investors, and a few select media personalities, all clinking glasses of champagne and congratulating me. My name was being thrown around like it meant something, and for the first time in a long while, I felt validated. But nothing felt like it was truly mine. Not the property, not the deal, not the accolades. It was all fleeting, and I couldn't shake the feeling that somewhere, lurking in the background, there were people waiting to remind me that my success wasn't enough. People who expected me to carry their weight while they sat back and judged me. I should have known they'd show up. The moment my father walked into the event, uninvited and already drunk, I could feel the air in the room shift. His wrinkled face was flushed, and his jacket hung off him like a rag, the way it always did when he'd been hitting the bottle too hard. I knew better than to confront him in front of everyone, but his presence alone felt like a slap to the face. The party began to feel too small, too suffocating, as if everyone in the room could sense the tension building. "Sarah, my dear," he slurred as he made his way toward me, his hand outstretched like he was about to bless me with his approval. "I hear you've been doing well for yourself." I forced a smile, shaking his hand. "I'm getting by, Dad. Thanks for coming." "You're getting by?" He chuckled, but it was laced with bitterness. "I didn't raise you to get by, Sarah. I raised you to be something. And now look at you, owning all this." He waved his hand around, gesturing to the room full of high-end furniture and glassy-eyed investors. "What about your old man, huh? You don't forget your roots, do you?" The words hit harder than I expected, and I took a small step back, trying to distance myself from his stench of alcohol and desperation. "I haven't forgotten, Dad. It's just things are different now." Before he could reply, Lisa appeared at his side. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled, and her skin glowed with that effortless suburban glow that seemed to come with being married to a man with a good job and an overflowing credit card. I almost hated her for how effortless everything seemed for her. She smiled at me with that perfect little grin she always used to make herself look like the victim. "Sarah, you look wonderful," she said, her eyes scanning the room, then narrowing when they landed on the champagne glasses in my hand. "I guess that's what happens when you work so hard, huh? You get to drink expensive wine in fancy places." I didn't have the energy to play her games, but I forced another smile. "Thanks, Lisa. You look great, too." Lisa leaned in a little closer, lowering her voice to a whisper only I could hear. "I hope you've got a bit left over for the rest of us, Sarah. You could probably help out with the mortgage on my house. Brad's been talking about moving to a bigger place, and with the kids growing up so fast, well," she trailed off, as if her words weren't completely transparent. I wasn't surprised. Lisa was always the one who pretended she didn't understand the value of money, the one who saw everything as a personal entitlement. This was just another instance of her trying to guilt trip me into helping her buy her way out of a problem she had no intention of fixing herself. "I'm sure Brad will find a way," I said, my voice tight but polite. I knew better than to give in. If I did, I'd be helping her finance her next unnecessary vacation or remodeling project before long. I turned back to my father, who was now staring at me with a look I couldn't quite read. "You know, Sarah," he said slowly, leaning in as if we were in a more intimate setting than a crowded room full of people. "I could use some help with the bills. You could fix that for me, couldn't you? You've got all this money now, and I haven't seen a dime of it." He waved his hand dismissively, as if he didn't need to elaborate. "It's not just the house. I've got some old debts that need clearing up. You're my daughter. You owe me." I froze. That was it. The inevitable moment had arrived. The moment when my father's selfishness collided with my success, demanding that I carry the weight of his failures. I swallowed hard, trying to keep my voice even. "Dad, I've already helped you out more times than I can count. I'm not going to be the one to fix your mistakes anymore." But he wasn't done. He had already moved on to his next target, and this time it was Michael, my husband. Michael had been quiet until now, nursing his drink and watching the scene unfold with that disapproving frown he always wore when things got tense. He wasn't a fan of my family, and the feeling was mutual, but I hadn't expected him to join in. "Hey, Michael, how about you help your wife out a little?" My father said, slurring his words. "She's doing so well now. Maybe she could spare a little bit for her old man." Michael's expression darkened, and I knew instantly where this was going. He set his glass down with a clink and crossed his arms. "Sarah has enough on her plate, Dad. She doesn't need to be supporting everyone." "You think she can't handle it?" My father spat, his face twisting into something ugly. "What do you think she's doing here, playing at being some big shot? She's my daughter. I helped her get here, and now she's too good to help me?" I could feel my heart pounding in my chest as I fought to stay calm. Every word out of my father's mouth seemed designed to cut me down, to diminish everything I'd worked for. It wasn't just about the money, it was about his entitlement, his belief that no matter how little he contributed, I owed him everything. I turned away from both of them, scanning the room for an escape. My father's voice was growing louder, and I could feel the eyes of the other guests on me, some uncomfortable, others intrigued. It was supposed to be a celebration, but I felt anything but celebratory. I felt like a prisoner, shackled to my family's demands and expectations. Finally, I walked over to one of the staff members and handed them my glass, forcing a smile. "I think I'm done for the night," I muttered, my voice tight. As I headed toward the exit, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about money. It was about control. They didn't want to be my family anymore. They wanted me to be their ATM, their lifeline to a comfortable life they had no intention of earning on their own. And somehow, I let it go on for too long. The next few days were a blur. The party should have been a high point in my career, a moment to celebrate my success, but it was hard to focus on anything other than the chaos that followed. My father's drunken outbursts still echoed in my ears, and I couldn't shake the image of his flushed face, demanding money as if it were his right. Every conversation I had with him since then was the same: more requests, more guilt, more of the same entitled nonsense. It wasn't just my father, though. Lisa was relentless too. She texted me, called me, sent me passive aggressive messages on social media, all inquiring about how my big new deal was going and, in the next breath, suggesting that it might be a good idea for me to lend them a hand with the little financial hiccup they were having. She never directly asked for money, of course. That would have been too bold. But the message was always clear: if you really cared about us, you'd help. I knew what Lisa was doing. She'd done it before. She'd learned early on that playing the family card was the quickest way to my wallet. She knew I couldn't say no when it came to the kids, or when she made me feel like I was being selfish for focusing on my career instead of being there for her family. But this time, I couldn't let it go on. I couldn't keep pretending that I didn't notice the constant undercurrent of manipulation. They didn't care about me. They cared about what I could give them. It was late one evening when Michael brought it up. He'd been quiet all day, his face etched with a familiar, pained expression. We'd barely spoken, and I couldn't help but wonder if he was feeling as suffocated by everything as I was. But when he finally spoke, his words were not the comfort I was hoping for. "You know," he began, his voice low, "your dad called me today. He's asking for more money.
What
More than
for?
what you gave him last week." "Unbelievable," I muttered under my breath, pacing away from him. I tried to swallow the anger that rose in my chest, but it tasted bitter and sharp. What does he need now? Apparently, he's got some legal issues he's working through. He mentioned a lawsuit he's facing. Claims he's going to lose his house if it doesn't get sorted. He says he's counting on you to help him out. Michael's voice was tight, as if he, too, was exhausted by this. But I could hear something else in his words, something that gnawed at me. He wasn't just frustrated with my father. He was frustrated with me. "I can't keep doing this," I said, turning to face him. "I can't keep throwing money at him and pretending it's going to fix anything. He doesn't change, Michael. He never does." Michael didn't respond immediately. Instead, he ran his hand through his hair, looking down at the floor. It was as if he were struggling with something, struggling to figure out how to say what needed to be said, but too afraid to say it out loud. "Sarah," he finally said, his voice soft, "I get that it's a lot. But I think you need to consider maybe you've been doing this for too long. Maybe you've been enabling him. I felt a sharp jolt, like he'd slapped me across the face. I didn't say anything for a moment, just stood there, processing his words. What are you talking about? I'm the one who's been supporting him. I'm the one who's been picking up the pieces while he gets drunk and screws up his life. What do you mean, enabling? Michael met my gaze, his eyes tired but steady. I mean, Sarah, you've been doing it for so long, it's become a pattern. And I think he's taken advantage of that. You're not helping him. You're just putting a band aid on a bullet wound. And now he's just going to keep asking for more, and more, and more. I could feel the heat rising in my chest again, my pulse quickening. The anger surged through me, but underneath it was something worse, something I didn't want to admit. It was the guilt. The guilt that maybe Michael was right. The guilt that maybe I had been enabling my father, letting him take from me while I convinced myself that I was doing it out of love. Don't talk to me about enabling, Michael, I said, my voice trembling. I don't need a lecture from you right now. Not when you've been hiding things from me. His face went pale, and for a moment, I regretted the words. But it was too late now. He knew I knew. What are you talking about? He asked, his voice hoarse. Don't play dumb, I snapped. I know about the money you've been taking from my accounts. I know about the investment deal you've been putting money into without telling me. The silence that followed was suffocating. Michael stood there, motionless, his eyes wide as if I'd just slapped him in front of the whole world. You don't trust me? He finally asked, his voice cold. It's not about trust, Michael, I said, my heart pounding. It's about respect. I work my ass off for every penny I make. And you've been taking that money behind my back, hiding things from me, acting like I'm some kind of idiot who won't notice. I don't know what's worse, the fact that you've been doing it, or the fact that you think I'm stupid enough to not catch on. His face twisted with a mix of anger and guilt. I wasn't trying to hide anything from you, Sarah. You just what? I cut him off. Used me to bail you out of your mess? This whole thing with my father and Lisa and all of them, it's just too much. You're all just trying to make me feel like I'm the one who's supposed to fix everything, like I'm the one who has to carry the weight of this family. And I'm done. I'm done being your. Hey, I could see the hurt in Michael's eyes, but there was something else there too. Something darker. You're really going to walk away from all of us over this, Sarah? You're really going to cut everyone out because you can't handle a little pressure? I took a deep breath, willing myself to stay calm. But my mind was screaming, and my chest ached as if the weight of everything was pressing down on me, crushing me under its force. I'm not cutting anyone out, but I am cutting out the toxic parts of my life. And that includes you, if this is the kind of marriage we have. I don't know what I expected in that moment, but Michael didn't say anything. He just turned and walked out of the room, leaving me standing there, numb and empty. I stood there for a long time after he left, trying to breathe, trying to make sense of it all. My father, my husband, Lisa, they had all drained me, emotionally and financially. And now, Michael and I were on the edge of something I couldn't take back. It felt like the walls were closing in around me. I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I couldn't keep pretending that I was strong enough to hold everyone up while they let me crumble. I thought I'd hit rock bottom, but the truth was, I hadn't even come close. A few days after my argument with Michael, I received a call that made me wish I had never picked up the phone. It was from my father. The voice on the other end was shaky, urgent. He sounded like he was about to implode. Sarah, you've got to help me, he said. The words rushed, as if there was no time to waste. They're coming for me, Sarah. The bank. The creditors. Stop. I cut him off, my voice sharp. What's going on, Dad? What's really going on? He hesitated. I could hear the clink of a bottle in the background, the unmistakable sound of glass hitting wood. The smell of whiskey practically jumped through the phone. It's just a little mess I got myself into, okay? But I need you to come through for me, like you always do. You've got the money, I don't, and if I don't pay them back, I'll lose everything. My house, my projects, everything. You know how it goes, right? I closed my eyes, rubbing my temple, trying to steady myself. My heart pounded in my chest. the frustration boiling over. How many times had I heard this? How many times had he called me for a bailout, using the same sob story, the same helpless tone? And every time I gave in just a little more. This time, though, I couldn't. I wouldn't. No, that. I can't do this anymore. The words came out more bitter than I intended, but it was too late to take them back. You've had enough chances. I've given you everything, and it's never enough. I can't keep bailing you out while you destroy your own life. Don't you dare turn your back on me, he snapped, his voice rising, full of that familiar venom I'd grown used to over the years. I'm your father. You owe me. I gave you everything when you were a kid, and now you've got all this money, and you're going to let your old man go under? Is that how it's going to be? I took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm inside my chest. But I was done. I was so done. The years of resentment, the endless expectations, the feeling of being trapped in a cycle of obligation. It was suffocating. I wasn't going to let him do this to me anymore. You don't get to guilt trip me anymore, Dad. Not this time. I exhaled slowly, my hand trembling around the phone. I can't fix this for you. You have to fix it yourself. I've been doing your dirty work for years, and it's cost me everything. It's time for you to face the consequences of your actions. I hung up before he could say anything else. My hands were shaking. I felt like I was suffocating. There was a dull throb in my temples, and my stomach churned. I was angry. No, furious. I walked into the living room where Michael was sitting, staring blankly at the TV. It was the kind of stillness that makes you feel like you've walked into a void, like everything that had been said and done between us was hanging there unresolved. Are you okay? He asked, glancing up at me as I stood there, fuming. I didn't answer right away. I just stood there, breathing, trying to collect myself. I wanted to scream. I wanted to throw something, anything. I wanted to explode. But the last thing I needed right now was another fight with Michael, not with everything else going on. Dad called me again. I said, my voice tight. Michael didn't say anything, just waited for me to continue. He's in trouble again, I added, my tone clipped. Said he needs me to bail him out. More debts, more excuses. The usual. Michael didn't respond immediately. He just looked at me, his expression unreadable. Then he said something that made my blood run cold. Keep asking you for more and more. He doesn't change. He never will. I stared at him, taken aback by the coldness in his voice. What do you mean by that? He turned to face me fully, his gaze heavy. I mean, you know exactly what he's doing. And you've been playing along with it for years. We've been playing along with it. And it's not just him. You're doing the same thing with me, Sarah. The words hit me like a slap to the face, and for a second, I couldn't breathe. I opened my mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Michael shook his head, a bitter laugh escaping his lips. You're so quick to get angry at him, but you don't even see it. You don't see how you've let this whole thing destroy you, destroy us. My chest tightened, and I could feel my pulse in my temples, like the pressure was building up with every passing second. What are you talking about? I spat, my voice sharp and defensive. You think I wanted this? I've been trying to fix everything, fix you, while you've been running around behind my back, making deals with my money, thinking I wouldn't find out. His face tightened, and for a moment, I saw something flicker in his eyes. Guilt? Regret? It was gone too quickly for me to know for sure. I never meant to hurt you, he said quietly, almost too quietly. But I thought you were too busy for me. You're always so wrapped up in your business, Sarah. I felt like I was invisible. I didn't know how to get your attention anymore. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. You want attention? You don't get to use me as an ATM, Michael. You don't get to manipulate me like that just because you're upset. You want something from me? You come to me directly like an adult. But you've been taking advantage of me for so long that it's hard for me to even see you anymore. He opened his mouth to say something else, but I cut him off. You've been lying to me, and I've been enabling it. The truth felt like a rock in my stomach, heavy and suffocating. I've been pretending everything was fine because I wanted to believe it. But it wasn't fine, Michael. It never was. There was a long silence between us. Michael looked away, his eyes distant, like he didn't know where to go from here. I couldn't blame him. I didn't know where to go either. But I did know one thing. I couldn't keep doing this. I couldn't keep letting these people tear me apart, draining me of everything I had left. I had to take control, even if it meant losing everything. I'm done, I whispered, barely able to say the words. I'm done. Michael didn't say anything, but I could see it in his eyes. He knew I meant it. The sound of the front door slamming shut echoed in my ears as Michael left. And in the silence that followed, I was left with nothing but the weight of my own decision. The days that followed felt like I was living in a fog. I couldn't remember the last time I had felt so empty, so drained. Michael had left, taking whatever remnants of peace I'd managed to hold on to with him. My father, still a mess, kept calling, each conversation more desperate than the last. And Lisa? She was relentless, her calls coming through at all hours of the day, her voice full of sweet-sounding pleas that didn't fool me for a second. But I had made my decision. I had to. There was no other way out. I had to cut them all off, every single one of them. It didn't matter how much they begged, how much they guilt-tripped me. They had already taken enough from me. And if I didn't do something, I'd lose myself entirely. I had been weak for too long, driven by guilt, by family obligation, by a sense of responsibility that had only fed their demands and left me empty. My father had taught me that over the years, how to give and give until there was nothing left to give, and yet he always found a way to make me feel like I wasn't doing enough, like I wasn't being a good daughter. I was done. The morning after Michael left, I sat at the kitchen table, staring at my phone. The texts from my father were unread, the missed calls from Lisa ignored. I had no idea where Michael had gone, but I didn't care anymore. Not today. I had bigger things to deal with. I called the lawyer. It felt like the only real step I could take. I had to make sure the assets, the money, the things I had worked so hard for were protected. I had already made the decision to cut ties with Michael, but now I needed to make sure there were no loopholes, no opportunities for him to worm his way back in. The lawyer answered after the second ring. Sarah, good morning. How can I help you today? I exhaled slowly, studying myself. I need you to prepare a legal separation agreement. Immediately. There was a long pause. Then the lawyer responded, his voice cautious. Are you sure, Sarah? A legal separation is a big step. You don't have to go through with it if you're just unsure. I'm sure. My voice was unwavering. I didn't want to hear anything else. I've thought about it for a long time, and this isn't something I'm taking lightly. I'm done trying to make things work when they don't. I need to protect myself, and I need to protect my assets. Understood, he said, the tone shifting to one of professionalism. I'll start the paperwork. We'll need to discuss your financials in detail, assets, debts, anything tied to both of you. Can you gather that information? I'll have it ready, I said firmly. I felt a sense of finality in my words, like I was closing the door on everything I had known. I hung up and sat back in my chair, my mind racing with everything that had led to this moment. This is what it's come to, I thought. This is what it means to take control. The next few hours passed in a blur of phone calls, emails, and preparation. I locked myself in my office, ignoring the ringing phone. I couldn't afford any distractions. The lawyer needed the financial details as soon as possible, and I had to focus on getting everything sorted. But despite my concentration, there was an ache deep in my chest, one that I couldn't shake. I had spent years, decades, making everyone else's problems my own. My father, Michael, Lisa, they all had their hands out, ready to take, ready to use me as their scapegoat, their safety net. And I had given in, every time, because that's what I had been taught. But what about me? What about the person I had become? What about the woman who had worked so hard to build something from nothing? I had lost sight of her. By the time I finished gathering all the documents for the lawyer, I was exhausted. But I still wasn't done. I knew there was one more person I had to confront before I could fully walk away. The hardest one. I picked up my phone and dialed my father's number, my heart pounding in my chest. I had already told him no, but I couldn't leave things like this. I couldn't walk away without giving him one last chance to hear the truth. Maybe, just maybe, he'd finally listen. Maybe it was just a matter of saying the right words. When he picked up, his voice was as jagged as I expected. "What do you want, Sarah? You gonna hang up on me again?" "Dad, I'm not hanging up," I said, my voice calm but firm. "I just want you to listen to me. I can't keep doing this. I'm done. I can't keep fixing your mistakes. You've put me in a position where I have no choice but to cut ties with you. And I can't keep supporting you financially, emotionally. It's killing me." He was silent for a long time. The only sound was his heavy breathing, like he was struggling to find the words. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and broken. "Sarah, you don't understand. I'm your father. You're supposed to help me. You've always helped me." "I know," I said, a knot tightening in my throat. "But you never asked if I wanted to help. You only ever cared about what you could get from me. And that's not love, Dad. That's dependency. And I can't keep doing it. I don't have anyone else," he shouted, his voice cracking. "You're all I have left. No, you don't get to guilt trip me anymore." I felt the anger rising again, but I kept it in check. "You've had your chances, Dad. You've had everything. I've given you everything. And every time you throw it back in my face. Please, Sarah. Please. I'm sorry
too.
I don't know what
I
to
said
do quietly, but I can't fix this for you. You have to fix it yourself. I'm walking away, Dad, and I'm not looking back." I hung up before he could say anything else. And when I did, it felt like a weight was lifted off my chest. I stared at the phone for a long moment, the silence ringing in my ears. And then, for the first time in weeks, I took a deep breath that didn't feel forced. I didn't feel like I was suffocating anymore. It was over. The phone calls stopped after that. The text stopped. For the first time, there was no one in my life trying to tear me down, trying to feed off of me. For the first time, I was free. But there was still something I had to face. Michael. I hadn't heard from him since he left, and I didn't know what to expect if I saw him again. But as the days passed, I realized that I couldn't leave things like this. I couldn't keep living in this half-empty space. It wasn't just my father and Lisa who had drained me. I had let Michael do the same, and I owed it to myself to see if there was any chance of finding a way back, or at the very least, to finally say what needed to be said. I couldn't keep running from it. No matter how much I told myself that I was done, that I had made my choice, there was still one last thing I needed to face: Michael. It had been a week since he walked out, leaving a trail of unanswered questions and unspoken words between us. I hadn't heard from him, not a single text, call, or email. It was as though he had vanished into thin air, leaving me to stew in the aftermath of our fight. And for the first few days, I thought that might be for the best. I had finally cut ties with the people who had drained me: my father, Lisa, and the endless web of expectations that had wrapped themselves around me like a noose. But Michael was different. I could feel his absence in the house, in the corners of every room, the empty side of the bed, the silence at the dinner table, the little things we used to do together, talking about our day, arguing over which movie to watch, sharing the quiet comfort of simply being in each other's presence. Now, it was just me. I didn't know where he was staying or what he was doing, but I knew I couldn't keep living this way. I couldn't keep pretending like the last 8 years of our marriage didn't exist. I had to know, was it over between us? Or could I still salvage something? I picked up my phone. My fingers hovered over the screen for a moment before I typed his number into the dialer. Call him. It felt like a punch in the gut. After everything we had been through, all the hurt, the secrets, the betrayals, how was I supposed to face him again? I almost didn't press call, but I had to. I needed answers, even if they were hard ones. I needed to know if there was any hope left or if this was really the end. The phone rang twice before he picked up, his voice a low rasp. "Sarah." It was almost like he hadn't expected me to call. I took a deep breath, pushing down the flutter of nerves that hit me like a wave. "Michael, we need to talk." "I don't think there's anything left to say," he said, his voice tight. "I'm not sure there's anything we can fix anymore." The words hit me like ice water to the face. He sounded resigned, defeated, even. And yet, there was still that edge of pain in his voice that made my chest ache. Please, I said, my voice softer now. Just hear me out. I don't want to make any decisions without talking to you first. There was a long pause, the kind that makes you wonder if the person on the other end has already moved on, if they've already let go of whatever connection you thought you had. But finally, he sighed. Fine, he said. I'll meet you. But this doesn't change anything, Sarah. You know that, right? I nodded to myself, though I knew he couldn't see me. I know. We agreed to meet at a cafe in the city, somewhere neutral, a place where we wouldn't have to worry about the weight of our house hanging over us. There, in the middle of the bustling city, we could be two strangers again, two people who had once shared everything but had lost it all. It felt fitting. When I walked into the cafe, I saw him right away. He was sitting by the window, looking down at his coffee, his face a mask of exhaustion. The way his shoulders slumped, the way he wasn't trying to hide the fatigue in his eyes, it struck me then how much of a toll this marriage had taken on both of us. I took a deep breath and walked over to the table, standing for a moment before I slid into the seat across from him. Neither of us spoke right away. There was too much unsaid, too many years of resentment and hurt to fill in one conversation. I didn't think you'd call, he said finally, breaking the silence. He sounded a little less bitter, a little more vulnerable, like he was trying to lower his defenses. I didn't want to call, I admit it, meeting his gaze for the first time. But I couldn't just leave things like they were. I don't know what happened to us, Michael. I don't know where it all went wrong, but I can't keep pretending like I'm okay with how things ended. He looked away, out the window for a moment, his fingers tapping lightly on the edge of his coffee cup. I don't think we can fix this, Sarah. Not after everything that's happened. You're right, you've been doing everything, and I've been taking from you. I've been selfish, and I didn't even see it. Michael, I don't want you to feel sorry for me, I said, my voice shaking just a little. I didn't come here to hear you apologize. I came because I need to know where we go from here. If there's no chance left, I need to know. If you're done with me, just tell me. I'm done pretending. He looked at me then, his expression shifting. His lips parted as if he wanted to speak, but no words came out. Finally, he let out a long sigh and placed his cup down on the table, his fingers curling around the edges. I don't know if I'm done, Sarah, he said quietly, the words heavy. I'm not sure I know what I want anymore. But I know one thing for sure. I can't keep living in the shadow of your success. I've been so caught up in feeling like I'm not enough that I've let it poison everything between us. My heart ached at his words, at the raw honesty I hadn't expected. It wasn't about your success, Michael, I said softly, reaching for his hand across the table, surprising even myself. It was about the fact that I couldn't breathe anymore. It was about the way I was losing myself while trying to hold everything together for you, for my family. I couldn't keep carrying everyone's weight on my shoulders. I know, and I see that now, he said, squeezing my hand gently. I don't know how to make it right, Sarah, but I want to try. I want to fix what's broken between us. But I don't know if it's even possible. I've hurt you too much. I felt a lump form in my throat. There was so much pain in his voice, so much regret, that I almost couldn't bear it. But at the same time, I knew it wasn't enough. Regret wasn't a cure. And I wasn't sure if I was ready to go back to a relationship built on apologies, on second chances that didn't take root. I can't keep living like this, Michael, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I can't keep giving and giving when all I get is emptiness in return. I've given everything I have, and I need to stop before there's nothing left of me. Maybe we both need to step away, take time to figure out who we are without the weight of all this. There was a long silence, and when he spoke again, his voice was barely audible. Maybe you're right, he said softly. Maybe we do need space. Maybe we need to find ourselves again, separately, before we can even think about what comes next. I nodded slowly, my chest tight. I don't know what the future holds, Michael, but I can't keep being the person I was. And I can't keep pretending that everything is fine, heavy with the weight of everything we'd been through. Neither of us said anything for a long while, just sitting there, letting the silence settle. And as we sat there, I knew that this conversation, this moment, was the beginning of something. Not the end. Not the resolution I had hoped for, but maybe the first step toward healing. Maybe, just maybe, we could both find our way back to ourselves, even if that meant walking away from each other for a while. And for the first time in a long time, I felt like I was finally making a choice for me. The weeks after my conversation with Michael felt like living in a constant state of flux, neither fully moving forward nor ever really looking back. We'd agreed on taking time apart, but neither of us knew what that truly meant or how long it would last. The space between us had been a bittersweet relief, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that something was still missing, still unsettled. In the days following our meeting, I dove deeper into the business side of my life. There was always something else to do, another deal to close, another investor to meet with. It was easy to throw myself into work. It kept me distracted from the ache in my chest, the one that hadn't fully gone away, despite all the decisions I had made. But even in the midst of my success, I knew I couldn't keep running from the other half of my life. The people I had cut out, my father, Lisa, Michael, kept gnawing at me. I hadn't spoken to my father in weeks, not since I told him I was done. Every time his name appeared on my phone, my stomach twisted into knots, a mix of guilt and frustration. But it was more than that. I couldn't ignore the fact that I was feeling something else, too. Relief. Relief. It sounded terrible, even to me, but it was true. Cutting them off had given me space to breathe. For the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't suffocating. I wasn't constantly worrying about how to fix everyone's problems. And that felt good. It felt right. Yet I couldn't ignore the fact that the silence between Michael and me was deafening. I wanted to call him. I wanted to fix what had broken between us, but I didn't know how to begin. I didn't know if it was even possible. The last time I had seen him, he had seemed so lost, so full of regret, but I wasn't sure if that was enough to heal the fractures that had formed over the years. One evening, as I sat alone in my apartment, sipping on a glass of wine and flipping through a stack of paperwork, my phone rang. My stomach did a flip when I saw the name on the screen. Michael. I stared at the phone for a moment, heart pounding. I hadn't expected this. The last time we spoke, there had been a sense of finality, a quiet agreement that we would give each other space. But now here he was calling me after all this time. I answered, my voice shaky despite my best efforts to sound calm. Hello, Sarah, he said, his voice familiar, but strained. Can we talk? I froze. It was as if he had reached through the phone and ripped me out of my own thoughts. I wasn't sure if I was ready to talk to him. I didn't know what I wanted to hear, but I also couldn't say no. I had waited for this moment, and now it was here. I'm listening, I said quietly, my hand gripping the edge of the counter. There was a long pause on the other end. When he spoke again, it was almost a whisper. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, he began, about what I've been doing to you, to us, and I've realized that I've been selfish. I've been trying to fill this emptiness inside me with things that don't matter, with money, with status, with whatever else I thought would make me feel whole. And in the process, I lost sight of what really mattered. I lost sight of you. I closed my eyes, feeling the sting of his words. He was right. We had both been caught in this cycle of dependency and disappointment, neither of us able to break free from the roles we had played in each other's lives. I don't know what to say, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. I've been so angry at you, Michael. I've been so angry at myself for letting everything go on the way it did. But I can't pretend that I'm not still hurt, that I don't still feel betrayed. You've hurt me more than you realize, and I don't know how to fix that. I know, he said, the regret heavy in his voice. I don't know if there's anything I can say to make it right, Sarah, but I need you to know that I'm sorry. I've been an idiot, and I've pushed you away when all you ever did was love me. I bit my lip, trying to keep the tears at bay. I had worked so hard to move past the pain, to move forward. But hearing his apology, hearing the rawness in his voice, shattered the wall I had so carefully built around myself. I've hurt you too, I said quietly. I know I haven't been perfect either. I let you take everything from me because I was too afraid to say no. I let you use me as your crutch, as your emotional ATM, and I let myself believe that I could fix everything. But I can't fix you, Michael. I can't fix what's broken in us. There was a long silence, and I could almost hear him processing my words. I felt like I was holding my breath, waiting for something, anything, that would tell me if we had a chance. But as the silence stretched, I realized that the question wasn't about fixing what was broken. It was about whether we could find a way to rebuild something new. I'm not asking you to fix me, Sarah, he said finally. I'm asking if we can find a way back to each other. I don't know what that looks like, but I'm willing to try. I want to try because I can't keep living this way. I've lost myself, too. And I don't want to keep losing you. I swallowed hard, feeling the weight of his words sink into me. I had never heard him sound this vulnerable before. And for the first time in months, I wasn't sure if I was ready to walk away. Maybe this was what I needed to hear, to know that he was still there, still willing to fight for us. I don't know if I'm ready to trust you again, I said quietly. I don't know if I'm ready to open myself up to you again, but maybe we can start over. Maybe we can find a way to start fresh, separately, first, to figure out who we are without all the baggage, all the hurt. Sarah, I don't want to lose you, he said softly. I just need to know if you'll give me a chance to prove that I can change, that I can be who you need me to be. I took a deep breath, looking out the window. It was late, and the city lights flickered below, casting a soft glow into the room. My heart was torn between the old wounds, the old patterns that had defined our relationship, and the possibility of something new. I'm willing to try, Michael, I said, my voice steady now. But I need time. I need space. And I need you to prove that you can be the man I need, not just the man you think I want. I'll do whatever it takes, he promised. As I hung up the phone, I realized that this wasn't the resolution I had hoped for, but maybe it was the one I needed. There was still a long road ahead, but for the first time in a while, I didn't feel like I was walking it alone. I was taking a step toward something new, toward healing. Maybe we wouldn't be the same people we had been before, but maybe that was okay. Maybe, just maybe, we could find a way to build something better from the wreckage Michael and I had that conversation. 2 weeks of silence and distance that felt both like a relief and a constant weight pressing down on my chest. In those 2 weeks, I had done what I thought was the only thing I could do. I took a step back. I spent long hours at work, spent time with friends who reminded me that I was more than just someone's wife, someone's daughter, someone's caretaker. I reconnected with parts of myself that had been buried under the rubble of other people's expectations. But no matter how many times I tried to push it out of my mind, no matter how many times I told myself I was done, really done, something kept pulling me back. I couldn't ignore the feelings I had for Michael. I couldn't deny that, no matter how many ways he had hurt me, there was still a part of me that loved him. It wasn't easy to admit. It wasn't easy to look at him and see the man I had married, the man I had once believed in so fiercely, when all I saw now was a man full of regret and uncertainty. But as much as I hated to admit it, the pain didn't go away. It didn't disappear just because I had pushed it aside. I was sitting at my desk one afternoon, working through a stack of contracts, when my phone buzzed. My stomach tightened. I'd been avoiding checking it, avoiding any messages from Michael. But something about the buzz this time made my pulse quicken. I picked it up, hesitating for just a moment before swiping the screen. It was a text from him. Can we meet? I need to see you. It was simple, direct. But there was something in the way the words were written, something raw in the simplicity, that made my heart race. I hadn't spoken to him in days. And while we had agreed to give each other space, I couldn't help but wonder if this was the moment I had been waiting for. I stared at the screen for a moment, my thoughts swirling. Could we do this? Could we meet and talk again without falling back into the old patterns? I didn't know. But as the minutes ticked by, I realized that the only way to know was to meet him. I took a deep breath, tapping out my response. Okay, let's meet. When? He replied almost immediately. Tonight, 7 p.m. Same place, the same cafe. It felt fitting, like our conversation was coming full circle, as though the place had become a symbol for the crossroads we were at. But as I prepared to leave, I felt a knot in my stomach. I had no idea what to expect. Would this be a fresh start, or just another painful conversation where we left things unresolved? When I arrived at the cafe, I found him sitting in the same spot by the window. His hands were resting on the table, but he wasn't looking at the door. His eyes were lost in thought, distant. When he saw me, his expression softened, and for the first time in a long while, I saw that faint glimmer of hope in his eyes. I sat down across from him, my heart pounding. There was so much unsaid between us, so much history that we could either acknowledge or ignore. The silence between us stretched for a moment before Michael spoke. "Sarah," he began, his voice hoarse, "I've been thinking about everything, about us, about what I've done, what I've failed to do. And I realized something important." He paused, his eyes searching mine for some kind of reaction. "What's that?" I asked, my voice quiet but steady. "I can't keep pretending like everything is okay," he said, his gaze never leaving mine. "I can't keep pretending like I'm okay when I'm not. And I don't think you're okay either. I can see it in your eyes every time we talk. Every time I see you, I see this person I don't recognize. And I know it's because of me. I've been selfish, Sarah. I've been living in this cloud of my own guilt and pride, and I never stopped to think about how you felt. I took everything from you, and I didn't even realize it until you were gone." The words stung, but they were the truth. He was right. He had taken so much from me, emotionally, mentally, even financially in some ways, and I had let him. I had let it happen. I had let him take, all while I convinced myself that I could fix it. But the truth was, I couldn't. "I don't know what to say to that," I whispered, feeling the weight of his words in my chest. "I don't know if it's enough. I don't know if it's enough for me to just forgive you because you finally see me. You finally see what I've been giving up, what I've been sacrificing. I don't know if that's enough to make it all better." "I don't think it can make it better," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I don't think anything can make it better. But I'm trying. I'm trying to be better. I'm trying to be the man you need, the man I was supposed to be all along. I don't want to lose you, Sarah. I'm not asking you to forgive me right away. I'm asking for a chance to prove to you that I can change, that I'm willing to change." The words hit me harder than I expected. I had been waiting for him to say something like this, waiting for him to acknowledge the depth of the hurt I'd felt, the way he had taken from me without ever once asking if I was okay. But now that he had said it, now that he had made this plea, I wasn't sure what to do with it. I wasn't sure how to respond. "You can't just say you'll change, Michael," I said softly. "You can't just tell me you'll do better and expect me to believe it. I need to see it. I need to see that you mean it. I can't keep hoping for things that never happen." "I know," he said, nodding. "And I know that words aren't enough. But I'm going to show you. I'm going to do whatever it takes to prove that I can be the man you deserve. I'm not asking for everything, Sarah. Just a chance." I swallowed hard. His words were raw, honest, and full of vulnerability. For the first time in a long time, I felt like he was truly there, not the man who had taken from me, but the man who was trying to rebuild, trying to make things right. "I don't know what that chance looks like yet," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "But I can't just keep going in circles with you. I need time. I need to figure out who I am without all of this weighing me down. And if I'm going to move forward with you, we need to start from scratch, from the very beginning." "I understand," he said, his eyes intense. "And I'll wait for you. I'll wait for as long as it takes. Just know that I'm here. I'm ready to do whatever it takes to make it right." As we sat there in the soft glow of the cafe, the weight of what was to come settled over me. I didn't know if we could make it. I didn't know if I could forgive him, if I could trust him again. But for the first time in a long time, I felt like there was a possibility of something new, a chance for both of us to rebuild, not just our relationship, but ourselves. And maybe that was enough to start. Maybe that was the first step toward healing. For the first time in weeks, I allowed myself to believe that change was possible. It had been a month since that night at the cafe, and I still didn't know what to make of what had happened. The days had felt like a blur, with Michael and I carefully trying to navigate this strange middle ground we found ourselves in. Neither of us had rushed into anything. Neither of us had pretended that the past could be erased. We were taking things slow, trying to figure out who we were now, who we could be if we let go of everything that had come before. But the truth was, it was harder than I had expected. It was easy to say we'd start over, but much more difficult to actually do it. We spent time together, sure. We went to dinners, we talked about trivial things, work, books, music, but we also kept things light. Neither of us was ready to dive deep into the painful truths we had been avoiding for so long. Every time we sat together in silence, the unspoken words between us felt like a weight hanging in the air. The hardest part was seeing the distance that had formed between us. It wasn't just the time we'd spent apart. It wasn't just the hurt. It was the change. I was different now. I had learned how to stand up for myself in ways I hadn't known I could. I wasn't willing to put myself last anymore, to let him take everything and give nothing back. And I wasn't sure if he could ever fully understand the person as I sat at my desk scrolling through emails. My phone buzzed. I didn't recognize the number, but it was a local area code, so I picked it up. Hello, I said, my voice cautious. Is this Sarah Mason? A voice on the other end asked, smooth but tense. I could tell right away that it wasn't a call I had been expecting. Yes, I replied. Who's this? My name is Ellen Foster, the voice said. I'm the managing partner at Foster and Wells. We spoke last month about a potential investment opportunity, and I was wondering if we could set up a meeting. There are some things I'd like to discuss. I froze for a moment. Alan Foster. I had been in talks with his firm for weeks, but I hadn't expected a follow-up call. Not now, not when everything else felt so unsettled. Of course, I said, shaking myself out of my momentary hesitation. I'd be happy to meet. When works for you. We set the meeting for the next day, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something was going to change, something was going to happen. I had been so focused on everything else, the space between Michael and me, the broken ties with my father, that I had put all my business dealings on the back burner. But maybe this would be the push I needed. Maybe, just maybe, it would be the distraction I needed from everything else. I arrived at the meeting a little early, sitting in the lobby and trying to calm my nerves. I checked my phone again, then tucked it back in my bag when I saw a message from Michael. Hey, I hope today is going well. I was thinking about our last conversation. I know we haven't had time to talk, but maybe we could do that tonight. I felt a pang in my chest. I had told him I'd be busy, but it didn't matter. I didn't know what to say anymore. I didn't know how to talk about what was happening. Every conversation felt like it could be the one where we'd finally face the truth about what we were or weren't doing together. The door to the conference room opened, and Alan Foster stepped in. He was tall, with a sharp suit and a handshake that made it clear he was used to dealing with people in high places. We exchanged pleasantries, and I tried to focus on the meeting, but my mind kept drifting back to Michael, to the mess of feelings that still lingered in me, no matter how hard I tried to ignore them. The meeting was long but productive. We discussed potential projects, ideas for investments, the direction I wanted to take the company, and the kind of partners I was looking for. It felt good to talk about something other than the emotional chaos of my life. I was good at this, at work, at being confident, at showing that I knew what I was doing. This was where I felt in control, where I didn't have to answer to anyone. As the meeting drew to a close, Alan looked at me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. You've got a good vision, Sarah, he said. I'm impressed. I think we could do some great things together. I'm glad to hear that, I replied, trying not to show how relieved I was. The pressure was on. Before you go, Alan continued, there's one more thing. I wanted to ask if you'd be willing to take a look at an offer from a few of our investors. It's a pretty lucrative deal, but it requires someone with a bit more leverage. I blinked, not sure where this was going. Leverage? I asked. Exactly, Alan said, leaning forward slightly. There's a high-profile business opportunity coming up, something a bit more exclusive than what you've been dealing with. It requires capital, but also influence. If you're interested, we'd like you to be a partner. My heart skipped a beat. The word partner felt heavy. This wasn't just another deal. This was something bigger, something that could take everything I had worked for and elevate it beyond anything I could have imagined. I'm listening, I said, trying to hide the excitement that bubbled up in my chest. We'd be happy to show you the details, but it's something you'll need to act on quickly, he said. Let me know if you're interested, and we can set up a time to talk specifics. I left the meeting feeling a rush of adrenaline. This was exactly what I had been working toward. But as I walked out of the building, something started to gnaw at me. Leverage, influence. Those weren't words I liked hearing in business. They felt cold, calculated. The more I thought about it, the more uncomfortable I became. I was tired of feeling like a tool for someone else's gain. Still, I couldn't deny that this offer could change everything. It could set me up for success in a way that few people ever got to experience. But I had a feeling that there was more to this than just a financial opportunity. As I sat in my car, I stared at my phone again. The message from Michael was still sitting there unanswered. I could feel the weight of it, the pull between the life I had built and the life I was trying to build with him. I didn't know how much longer I could keep balancing the two. Something had to give. I sighed deeply, my fingers hovering over the screen. Could I do both? Could I really have it all? Or was this just another illusion I was chasing? There was only one way to find out. I sent Michael a quick reply. Let's talk tonight. I'll call you when I'm done. And then, as I drove back to my apartment, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could still work out. But deep down, I knew it would require more than just a second chance. It would require a sacrifice. And I wasn't sure I was ready to give up everything to make it work. But for now, it would have to be enough. The moment I walked into my apartment that evening, I felt like I was carrying the weight of two worlds. On one side, there was the business opportunity with Alan and his investors, an offer that could change everything for me. It was ambitious, risky, and possibly the key to securing my future. But on the other side, there was Michael, the man I had loved, the man I still wasn't sure how to forgive. The tension between the two felt suffocating. As I hung up my coat and set my keys down on the counter, my phone buzzed with a new message from him. I'm waiting for you. I took a deep breath. This conversation had to happen tonight, no more stalling. I couldn't keep stringing him along while I was lost in my own indecision. I couldn't keep avoiding the hard questions. I didn't even know what I wanted to hear from him anymore. I didn't know if I could trust him again, or if I even should. I went into the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and sat down to collect my thoughts. I had made so many mistakes, but I had also learned so much over the past few months. I had learned that I couldn't keep living for other people. I had learned that I needed to stop being afraid of losing control and start taking charge of my own life. I stared at my phone for a few moments, weighing my options. I could call Michael, talk through everything, and risk slipping back into old patterns. Or I could put my energy into building something for myself, something that didn't require anyone else's validation. But that would mean turning my back on the one person who had once been my whole world, who was still tangled up in my heart. There was no perfect answer, no perfect way to fix everything. So I decided to do what felt right in the moment. I called him. He answered on the second ring. Sarah? His voice was low, tentative. It was the voice of someone who wasn't sure if they were about to face a second chance or a permanent goodbye. I'm here, I said, keeping my voice steady. Are you at home? Yes, he said. I've been waiting for you. I closed my eyes for a moment. There was so much weight in those words, so much meaning. It wasn't just a physical weight. It was an emotional one. He was waiting for me to make a decision. He was waiting for me to come back to him, to let him back in. I took a deep breath. I'll be there in a few minutes. I hung up the phone and grabbed my coat again. My pulse quickened. I wasn't sure what I was walking into, but I knew I couldn't keep dragging this out. I
When I
needed to
arrived at
face
his
it.
apartment, I needed to
I
face
stood at the
him.
door for a moment, taking in the silence. It was like I could feel the unresolved tension in the air. I could feel the years of things left unsaid, the trust that had been broken and never fully repaired. I knocked softly, and after a moment, the door opened. Michael stood there, his face tired, worn, but with an expression that showed he was still holding on to something, a flicker of hope, maybe. Sarah, he said, his voice a little hoarse. Come. I stepped inside and immediately noticed how different the apartment felt. The usual clutter was gone. The shelves were more organized, the floor swept clean. It felt empty, like he had stripped away everything that wasn't important anymore, leaving only what was essential. I wasn't sure what to make of it. I didn't know what to do, he said, running a hand through his hair. I've been thinking about everything. About us. About what I want. I'm not perfect. I know I've hurt you, Sarah. But I don't know how to fix this without you. I stared at him for a moment, my chest tightening. His words, I don't know how to fix this without you, stung in a way I hadn't expected. He was right. We were tangled in each other, and no matter how hard we tried, we couldn't untangle the mess we'd made. I don't know how to fix this either, I said quietly. I've tried, Michael. I've tried for so long, but I've been so busy trying to fix everything for everyone else that I forgot to fix myself. I forgot to take care of the person who needed it the most. He looked at me, pain flashing across his face. I know I've taken so much from you. I've been selfish, and I've hurt you in ways I can't even begin to make up for. I don't know what to do to make you see that I'm sorry, but I'm trying. I'm trying, Sarah. For you. For us. I swallowed hard, trying to push down the wave of emotion that threatened to overwhelm me. I wanted to believe him. I wanted to believe that we could somehow find our way back. But I wasn't sure we could. I wasn't sure if I was even the same person anymore, let alone the same person he had fallen in love with. I don't know if I can forgive you, I said softly. I don't know if I can go back to how things were. But I can't keep pretending like I don't still care. I can't pretend like you don't still matter to me. There was silence between us, a heavy, aching silence. I wasn't sure where to go from here. I wasn't sure if we could even find a way forward, or if this was the end. He stepped closer to me, and for a moment, I felt like I was standing at the edge of something that could either destroy us or rebuild us. He reached out, his hand tentative at first, but then more certain as he brushed a strand of hair from my face. I don't know what the future holds for us, he said, his voice trembling. But I know that I want to try. I want to try to be the man you need, the man I should have been from the start. I looked into his eyes, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I saw a man who was genuinely trying to change. A man who was no longer hiding behind his mistakes, but was owning them, confronting them. It wasn't perfect, but it was something. I don't know if we'll ever be the same, I whispered. But maybe we can find something new, something that's ours, without all the old baggage. He nodded, his hand still resting lightly on my shoulder. I'm willing to try, Sarah. I'll do whatever it takes. For the first time in a long time, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, we could make it work. It wouldn't be easy. It wouldn't be a quick fix. But there was a chance, a real chance for us to rebuild together, this time with both of us fully invested. But even as I thought that, I knew there were no guarantees, no easy answers. What we were doing was taking a leap of faith, and I wasn't sure what the landing would look like. But for now, it was enough to take that first step, enough to trust just a little that we could find our way back to each other. At least, that's what I told myself. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to start again.